The following transmission contains unencrypted instances of explicit language. Mature audiences are cleared to proceed.
Moira, run analysis on Fort Red Border.
Robert Redford.
Now, give me Ironized Piety.
Sidney Poitier.
Okay. How about Hire Pro Vixen, Mendy All My Corn, and Data Driven Shirt?
River Phoenix. Mary McDonnell. David Straven.
Hey guys, I was just checking in to see if you guys were ready to do the sneakers episode.
Yeah, but check this out. Moira, give me Leg Be Skinny.
Ben Kingsley.
So you guys are ready.
We're easy.
What?
I think he means yes we are.
Shall we begin? Let's begin.
Sneakers really does showcase the bleeding edge of data tech right as it existed just before the explosion of the World Wide Web. It's full of charmingly antiquated modem technology as well as references to the old phone freak culture that snaked its way up around the old system and eventually embedded itself into the development of the internet as we know it now. I'm Todd.
And I'm Dave, and we like to talk about spy movies.
And we are likely never, I repeat, never going to see this much star power in a spy comedy ever again in this episode of Spies Like Us. 1992, a contemporary film. It is literally just post-Cold War, because we're talking Herbert Walker in the White House, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's a really good example of just how diverse movies were in the 90s. I know we've mentioned this before. I just feel like we have to mention it again every time it comes up because these lists are crazy. Why don't you read us some?
Reservoir Dogs, A League of Their Own, A Few Good Men, Unforgiven, My Cousin Vinny, Wayne's World, Last of the Mohicans, Basic Instinct, The Bodyguard, The Crying Game, Chaplin, Malcolm X. I mean, these are all over the board.
Yeah. And this is the year where Best Picture was Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, that was a good one.
It's a really good one.
Yeah.
Might be one of the best movies of all time.
I think there was supposed to be a TV series from NBC in 2016, but that actually never happened. I know that's like the big thing where like they're redoing old movies into TV shows these days. I think that would have been a lot of fun, but
It'd be a damn lot of fun.
Yeah. But this is really a heist movie. There's a lot of spy aspects to it and quite a bit of tradecraft to talk about, but a lot of the characters are ex-intelligence or con men or some sort of place where they would fit for this type of a story.
A lot of hackers.
Yes, lots of hackers.
I'm really surprised that the director of this film, who also wrote it, by the way, didn't make a shit ton more movies in this style. Doesn't really direct anything after this except Sum of All Fears, but he is still busy. Most recently is the creator of the Good Fight TV show, which I haven't seen, but I hear really good things about.
And what this all like, just how the cast is like super all-star caliber. Definitely a script like this good would be able to handle that.
Yeah, I agree. He had some help with the script from the two writers of War Games. You know that movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it since it came out, and that was a long time ago. But
yeah, me neither. I wonder if it would fit for Spies Like Us somewhere.
We should definitely take a look.
We should take a look. But yeah, that's another movie that, like this one, is like very steeped in the just before the internet as we know it kind of hacking culture.
Right. And
Sneakers is really interesting, I think, as a piece of cultural reference to that specific time in technology. It was like, I don't know, like, I mean, the internet technically like exists since like what, the 60s or something.
Yeah, but it was all military.
Right, and it doesn't get broadened out and approved for like it was there were regulations that like you didn't have this ISP structure. You didn't have like anybody providing internet services for commercial ventures until like right after this. So this is still when like the internet is a very like dark and mysterious thing, and often hacking into it is not just a matter of like, I don't know, typing in the right password or something, but you actually have to like kind of get in and fuck with the hardware itself that the communications are running on.
Yeah, it wasn't just software. You really had to know your stuff. You had to know like electronics and communications. You had like really on the lowest level possible of I guess computer communication. Like you had to understand how the hardware worked, opening and closing gates and stuff like that. So it was kind of cool that we had tons of scenes where they really got into the tech nitty gritty.
Yeah, even decades later, people that are in the know actually really respect the tech of the movie Sneakers.
Even though it's like super old technology, it looks like to us, but it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, and they had some really heavyweight consultants in encryption, like some really big names. Some people, I don't know all the history of tech, but just as I was researching this, like there are people that if you're really into the development of computers and especially like encryption and security protocols, you go gaga over this movie. For instance, like all the math that you see in the mathematician's presentation that what's his name, Martin and Liz go to, that's all legit stuff. It's not gobbledygook.
It looked pretty serious.
Real formulas. And and apparently like, the stuff that you see flying over Whistler's screen while he's doing his hacking and stuff, like that's all like legit terminology and codes and protocols, and not just some stuff that like you had an intern like bang out to just kind of have something on the screen for the audience to look at.
And I think supposedly there's tons of Easter eggs in this movie for that whole tech group, that old school tech. I mean, there's probably way too many to even go over in the podcast.
Did you know about the Captain Crunch reference? That's one of that's one of the big cool ones. As they're searching through Ned's trash, as they're trying to like figure out how they're gonna leverage him or whatever they're gonna do,
Right.
Figure out how to get his card or whatever.
Yeah.
A Captain Crunch box is like prominently shown there, and that is like not just there to be there. That's a specific reference to there's one of the old like the granddaddy of all granddaddies of hackers was a guy named Captain Crunch, and he got that name because he had figured out that the toy whistle that was provided in Captain Crunch boxes of the time could be used to fool like the phone system, and that was one of the original kick-ass like phone freaking hacks.
Oh wow, that's a really really cool tidbit. That's funny.
And supposedly the character Cosmo is inspired by, not necessarily based on, but inspired on Captain Crunch.
Yeah, I know that Whistler was based on a real guy too. There was a blind phone freak that was able to fool the phone just by whistling, and he had apparently like perfect pitch. I mean, when we found that out, I was super excited about that. That's kind of like really cool that somebody's able to do that. Perfect pitch on its own is really difficult, but to even just like fake the phone sounds to like, I guess, trick phone systems, that's really tough.
And hence, that's how he gets the name Whistler. It would have been really cool to see that trick done in the movie, I think.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
But yeah, lots of weird stuff like that, names of characters and little references. There's a lot of Easter eggs, too, that are not necessarily tech-related, like the fact, I think, Martin Bishop is Robert Redford's alias, and in the movie, like 3 Days of the Condor, there was like a list of casualties from the explosion of his CIA office, something like that. I haven't actually seen the movie yet. And the last two names on the list are Martin and Bishop.
Oh, that's cool. And Dan Aykroyd's character's mother, and that was James Angleton's code name. I'm not sure if that's directly what they were going for, because his character isn't exactly CIA, but it was kind of cool that they used that. That would be my guess.
But he's obsessed with conspiracies, and wasn't that true of Angleton?
That's true. Yeah. He was James Angleton went on a witch hunt after they'd found out that Kim Philby was a triple agent, and that was like one of his closest friends or whatever. He went like on a full blast witch hunt for communists and even found more moles in the CIA than were expected.
Last thing I wanted to note about this movie and like its place in tech history is that like they were aware of this at the time. This is the movie they were consciously building, and they even went so far as to make the press kit was released to journalists on a 3x5 or 3.5-inch floppy disk, and that was the first digital press kit in history. So they were really trying to underline the
that this is a tech movie.
The director went like live online to answer the questions of early net users, and that was also something that was just new at the time. To like, I don't know.
Really cool.
What would be the parallel of that now? Is like they would do like a
Ask Me Anything on Reddit or something.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So
Yeah.
these were the first people to think of that, even way back then.
Oh, that's cool. A CompuServe? Wow. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
It does take me back.
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah, he went on through CompuServe. Wow. That's a name I've not heard in a while.
There's a couple other notes just general notes about the movie I wanted to make before we go to the briefing room. One of which was, I was surprised to see that this movie comes out before Mission Impossible. In fact, it comes out before Mission Impossible by 6 years, because the kind of stuff they do, especially on the final op, like almost it. When I look at that, that feels like they're ripping off Mission Impossible, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's a lot of moments where you feel like, wow, this is like another Mission Impossible. But I think I brought that up to you that like they could have gotten it from the show, and you had told me no, the old show was never that crazy. It was only the movies where they were pulling off stunts like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like the TV show was mostly like using the masks, and they would they would do that kind of thing where like you drug someone or something, and then they like wake up in their office, but it's not really their office.
Yeah.
and they've made like a whole elaborate like set and recreated everything perfectly, and the people around them are wearing masks to look like the people. It was all like psychological manipulation.
That's
stuff.
interesting.
They didn't do the weird kind of Tom Cruise like dropping in through the ceiling kind of stuff. At least as far as I remember.
Right.
I could be wrong about that, but we're definitely going to do that TV show one of these days.
Absolutely.
And I really just could not think of or find or remember a movie that had done this kind of like elaborate, I don't know, electronic and hacking based heist kind of stuff.
Well, a lot of this tech was pretty, I guess, hidden from the public. I don't think a lot of the public would have known this type of stuff, even when this film came out. I mean, like the personal computer internet days of AOL was like what, mid-90s. So I think the general public was not aware of the level of tech that was out there.
Yeah, for its time, this is again like really like bleeding edge stuff.
Yeah.
And last thing I wanted to say is we got a really diverse cast here, and I think it's a very much to the movie's credit, to the director's credit, and everything that like they managed to get all of these people with all these diverse talents, and some of them that are capable of doing like much more serious work than this, right? But that they managed to get everybody like right on the same tone, the same kind of like light. It's light, but I don't know. This movie, there's a bunch of things where like if something was played a little too serious, it would seem wrong, and if something was played a little too goofy, it would feel wrong. But everyone just manages to color inside the lines.
Yeah, it was definitely a heavyweight cast, and yeah, you're right. The characters they're playing weren't like Oscar-worthy characters, but these are all like all-star cast members, and so I think they really played well off of each other.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So we might talk more about the individual actors in the briefing room. I think we're going to hit this one character by character.
Mm-hmm.
You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Voice pattern recognized. Retinal scan complete. Validating security clearance. Clearance granted. You may now enter the briefing room.
Let's start off by talking about our main character, who's played by Robert Redford. And I wanted to ask you, David, what your, general history with, opinion of Robert Redford is in general?
My personal experiences were just based on my parents and my uncle, because they grew up more with Robert Redford as like this big star. But I remember seeing this film several times as a kid because they always wanted to watch it because, the cast. And so this is actually how I was introduced to Redford. My personal other experiences was seeing him in Spy Game. Wasn't he in The Sting?
He is in The Sting. That's one of the movies I really like him in.
Yeah, and so those are my experiences. But the big heartthrob or huge name star that I guess our parents' generation knew him as, I didn't have that experience. Mine was more kind of inherited, so to speak.
Yeah, same for me. It was definitely like my parents that made sure that I saw The Sting, and also Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Tell me you've seen that movie.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I totally forgot he was in that, too. Yes, I definitely have seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. That's right. A great movie.
So I grew up knowing who he was. And, I looked him up on IMDb, and I see that he has actually worked a lot more than I thought he was, like since his stuff in the 70s. But he tends to show up in a lot of movies that I just don't really care that much about, with some minor exceptions like this one. And I did think he did a cool little turn as the villain in Winter Soldier. That was kind of cute to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got chops. I like Rob.
In Sneakers, Martin Bryce is the character that Robert Redford plays. It starts out in the 70s where him and his friend are kind of hacking into Republican servers and financial accounts to transfer large amounts of their money into, left-wing revolutionary cases. But that plan gets botched, and he has to escape to Canada and returns to America as Martin Bishop, in a new alias, who are we're led to believe the government has no files on whatsoever. So he's obviously very talented if he's able to create this kind of character that even the government hasn't been able to figure it out. Now, he runs this security kind of business where he breaks into high-end businesses to show them their security, I guess, leaks or weaknesses. And by the way, sneakers actually turns out to be the exact term for that kind of work that they did at the time. We thought it was just kind of like a goofy name for the movie, but apparently that was actually what you would call a team like this. I think nowadays something like that, they'd be called ethical hackers. I actually have a couple friends that do that will work for large tech companies, and they purposely try and break into the company's computer systems, but it's all digital. This team actually physically broke into banks and were able to steal money without getting caught type of thing, and that's what they got paid to do. Martin Bishop is kind of the point man for the team. He's the leader that kind of makes all the decisions, I guess. He'd be like kind of the shot caller of the business. But he's not really the tech guy. He's more specialized in HUMINT, which is, short for human intelligence. He's this charismatic that's really thinks really quickly on his feet, and he knows how to get people to kind of do things. He's a really street smart type of guy. But he also knows how to let his team work with their specialties and support the team. So it's not like he's this one man superstar show. He's not he's not like the Kobe of the team. Like he knows his place on the team, And even though he's kind of calling the shots, he knows that the rest of the team is really important. And they often are the ones behind the scenes guiding him, even though he's out talking to people. They'll be communicating to him over a radio into his ear, helping him out with information.
Yeah, he does a really good job of just being like the point of the spear.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's not a one-man show and he has these lackeys. Like he's actually he trusts his teammates, and he's brought them in for very specific reasons because of their talents, and he respects how good they are at it. He does get duped by our goons, our main boss's goons in the story of Sneakers. He gets duped into stealing a box, which we'll definitely talk quite a bit about later when we get into them.
And by goons, that's just our pet name for the two dudes that pose as NSA guys to talk him into getting that black box for him.
Right, and they really go to town on him, and we're definitely going to go into depth with that.
They'll get their own section.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first op that they talk him into doing is just recovering this black box, and it's a fairly straightforward and simple op. The movie maybe makes it look a little more complicated than necessary, but I think that was just structured out to make sure that we are walked through and kind of see what the different talents of his team are and how they support him.
When they do a whole surveillance scene to find out the person, to get information, they find the location. They actually pull this really, really cool trick in the lobby to get into, I guess it's a condo, but it's one of those really, really high-end condos that are like got a heavy security lobby system. And they really run this play. Hey, come on, cut me some slack. I'm going to get fired here, Well, River Phoenix plays that character. Martin Bishop runs up and he's like, hey, did my wife leave a cake here? And the concierge is like, no. And then he just goes back to arguing. Then you hear a car honk and he goes, oh, there she is. And he runs out, runs back in with a giant box of cake with balloons. Meanwhile, the concierge is still arguing with River Phoenix. And Martin Bishop just runs in and is just like, just ring the buzzer.
What you like the most is like how elaborately they set it up, like in the first part, like the fact he shows up early in the scene and then shows up later, so that it's all like set up in the guy's head.
Right, he's already kind of planted it, and it's not like a one-man show. You have River Phoenix's character pretending to be the delivery guy with like tens of boxes, like, hey, I'm just doing my job. Let me in, And
someone's got to be outside to honk the horn at the right time.
Exactly, and here it is. It's a very believable scene. The guy brings in a giant cake with balloons. He's like, look, there's a party. They need me. I didn't bring my keys down. I was in a rush. You saw me. I asked for the cake. So I'm putting this as actually, and I know it's a little early to be giving us our number one, but this is definitely my number one best tradecraft. I just love how elaborately played out this was. How they were able to, instead of physically breaking in to this huge building in a number of different ways, they just kind of got through the security by creating this kind of quick little cute story, and it worked. And I think it's very believable that this type of thing would work.
Sure. And I like, besides that, I mean, I guess his main skill that he seems to have is that he just thinks quickly on his feet and, can improvise when people are asking him tough questions.
Right. Like when he runs into the lady at the condo, and it was totally unexpected. He was able, even though he had his team kind of whispering in his ear, he was able to come up with stuff in the moment to try and explain why he was there.
Right, and that's why you put him on that job.
Now, when they get the box, he finds out that those NSA goons, turns out they actually weren't actually NSA, and they were actually the bad guys, and they were trying to get it for themselves. And that actually sets up a whole different situation. And Martin Bishop isn't completely this invincible point man. Actually, one of my worst trade crafts is there's a point in the film where he's talking to this Russian ambassador type who actually used to work for or still works for the KGB, but they know each other somehow, and we'll get into him later. But he had an opportunity to get asylum because they get pulled over by the FBI. But that whole scene, it didn't make sense why the FBI would pull over the Russian guy to specifically pick him up. And I think it was a really dangerous situation. And even though it looked like the Russian guy was trying to force him into asylum, he wouldn't have lost anything really, and it would have given him time to figure things out. And he could have always left, I guess. I don't know, it's weird, but I marked that as my number 2 word, tradecraft. So he's not like completely invincible like in a lot of spy, like the Bond films, or like when we did Our Man Flint, where it's just the guy can never make a mistake. So it really humanized Martin Bishop quite a bit.
Yeah, I like the fact he's definitely not an action hero. My number 1 worst tradecraft is also going to get pinned on Martin, but I don't want to talk about it right now because it comes way at the end of the movie.
Okay.
So we'll be covering that in part 2.
Okay.
Next up, we got Crease, which I love that name, by the way. And for this one, we get Sidney Poitier. The star power of this movie just keeps going wah, 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 wah. Like,
yeah.
way up. This is actually one of his last movies for the theater. He did some TV movies after this, and only a few. And he had actually been gone from acting for over 10 years at the time he comes back and does Sneakers. And I gotta say, the man has sure not missed a step. Sidney Poitier, I actually haven't seen any of his old movies. I know, or I didn't know, but like if you had put me in a trivia situation and you'd asked me, for instance, like who was the first black actor to win the Oscar for best acting, like I would have guessed Sidney Poitier, and it turns out I would have been right. I saw in my research he's considered the first black movie star. I just don't know his work, but if just this little, like, not tiny but small-ish role, if this is any indication, like I can see like this man can fucking act.
Absolutely. And like just seeing him act after 10 years and he's still kind of that much of a powerhouse on screen it's
impressive.
Very
it's
impressive.
Really impressive.
In Sneakers, he plays kind of like the second in command, but I don't know, you get the feeling that the amount of respect Martin Bishop gives him, he's more like of a peer. I mean, because, Kreese was ex-CIA and is definitely nothing to sneer at. And when you see Martin off doing things, Kreese is in the van calling the shots. So he's kind of like I guess a intelligence analyst and a strategist. Elder advisor. He's been in a number of different situations. You can tell the guy has got a tons of experience. So anytime anything's going on, he's kind of thinking out the situation and making like really big decisions, and a lot of big recommendations. And people just go along with what he says. So it's even though Martin kind of, I guess, owns the business, Kreese pretty much makes a lot of decisions.
He's analogous to Glasses in our recent Munich episode, whereas that guy said, what's your job? And the guy's like, I worry. And Kreese does the most worrying.
Yeah, he definitely worries about everything.
Yeah,
everything's a big risk. Everything, yeah. And so he does, and especially for how much he worries, huge plus spy points. That night that they find out, Liz learned about the black box, and they found out that somebody sold out Martin, and she was one of the people that knew Martin's secret. He didn't let anybody leave, including Liz.
You're talking about when they found out just how dangerous and powerful this black box.
The black box was that they could shut down Federal Reserve, they could change like air traffic control stuff. So he doesn't he goes on full lockdown. Nobody leaves the building till we get this box secured somewhere. And you've heard me in a bunch of our podcast episodes complaining about how little people are concerned about things.
Right.
And especially especially since when we talked about, you brought up Munich, the Warrior guy, he was the one that completely didn't was indiscreet about that honey trap and gets himself killed, and he's the one that's supposed to worry about everything. You know, so I really liked that they had Kreese be very concerned, go full lockdown, no one's leaving till we figure out what's going on.
I couldn't see any other member of the group stepping up to do that because, the Mary McDonnell character, Liz, that's their friend,
Right.
Like, I can't see any of the other ones saying, like, nope, you are not leaving. But Kreese is the guy. He's taking no chances. That's why he gets the spy point.
Yeah, and she probably wouldn't have, if Martin was the one that tried to tell her that she's not leaving, she would have been like, get out of here. But, I think it's different that Kreese, it has a different gravitas to it, having Kreese be the one to tell her she's not leaving.
Yeah, so that was good. I do got a bit of minus spy points, though, and I don't have to pin it on Kreese, but I think I will just because I feel like, again, we just talked about he's the one that's supposed to be, the worrier. And I think you always need someone in that role of always thinking of, like, what's the worst that could happen? And looking out for that. And, we have the scene where Martin delivers the black box, and that's when Kreese just happens to notice that the newspaper has, like, it was like a front page story
in the car that they used to, like, deliver the box.
Right? Yeah, which I don't even know why that's a front page story, but it happens to be, and we already know he's freaked out that he's, even before they found out how bad and dangerous the black box would be, like, he didn't even want to take the job in the first place, knowing that they were tangling with foreign governments. That's not what this team is spec'd for, he was talking about the fact that they could be dealing with people that would kill them even before they knew about the black box, even before they took the job. And I think that if you're doing that, like, one of the just one of the steps you take is start paying attention to the news. Read the newspaper every day. See if the Russians are in town. See if the, who are the guys that kill the doctor in Back to the Future? The Libyans?
Yeah.
Yeah. Find out if the Libyans are in town or something.
Right.
Just that kind of thing. So, slight minus spy points on him. He slipped on that. And that, by the way, I think that's a job you give to Carl. That seems like Carl's kind of gig. Carl kind of sometimes feels like the intern. We're talking about the River Phoenix character here.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the intern and gopher kind of guy of the group, and I think that's the job you give to him. As soon as they get involved in this stuff, you say, like, hey, Carl, get these every day. Go out and get this newspaper, this newspaper, this newspaper. Scan it for anything that might be relevant to us, and if you find anything, bring it up. Final note on Kreese, he's the only guy that actually does any kind of violence in the film. When he, like, disarms the distracted guards at the toy company, like, he's probably the only person that, like, would be any good in a fight, even though this movie is definitely not about fighting. Unless,
it really wasn't. There wasn't a whole lot of violence whatsoever, which is really interesting because there's, like, a whole, like, soapbox speech towards the end about, it's not about guns anymore, it's about information. So I think thematically they did that on purpose.
It's a cute movie that way, and I feel like modern movies tackling the same thing, I feel like you would be getting studio pressure to put in some more action scenes.
Yeah.
But they very wisely, in my opinion, stay away from that in here. And and then there's one other thing, which is we got Carl, who's going to be our next topic. Who, like, he's advertised as the hacker of the group, right? That's kind of like what they talk about, like, when the goons are going over, like, talking to Martin about, like, all the history of his team and stuff. That's the only thing we find out about him, is that he hacked into his high school to change his grades.
To change his grades, right? Yeah, but he doesn't really do a whole lot of hacking.
He doesn't. And there's 3 hacking jobs in the movie that Carl was right there. like in the room, available. Hey, I'm your hacker. But
Yeah.
Kreese does 2 of those. Would have given Carl a little more depth if we'd got. I think we would have respected Carl more as an audience if he had done all the hacking jobs in the movie. He does
Yeah.
do one. He does do the. He hacks the DMV when they're trying to find out everything they can about Ned.
Oh, that's yeah.
And he's got that little black book full of server phone numbers. And remember, back to the tech of this movie, this is back like before URLs, when to contact a computer, you did it through a modem, which meant doing it through the phone line, which meant like all the servers had literally a phone number instead of a web address. Because the World Wide Web doesn't, or at least maybe it had just come out, or just comes out after this, but yeah, it's still a time when you do phone numbers to hack into computers.
Yeah, now it's like the IP address or something.
Yeah. You want to tell us what else Carl does?
Oh, well, he's the one that got the blueprints, right? What he does is he kind of went to the, I guess, county records or public records and paid off somebody like $50 to get the blueprints for the, what was it, the toy building layouts?
Yes, sir. And I believe you were telling me that this is known as open source intelligence and geointelligence. Is these kind of jobs? You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I don't know how much open source this would be, because if he had to pay the guy off, he wouldn't legally have access to those blueprints, I guess. But it is, I guess, if it's in the public register, it would be. I'm not sure. But the GeoInt definitely, because it's about a location and the layout of that location. So he basically acquires that type of information. I don't know if for GeoInt, it's just like if they have satellite imagery or like planes take pictures over a thing. But this type of instance, it would be the same thing, because it's the layout of a location and different specific pieces of information about a location.
Yeah, he seems to have that pretty well covered, as
Yeah.
well as doing his gopher work and distraction stuff, and basically also doing like I don't know, I see like some crossover with the stuff that Carl and Mother do. But before we go on to Mother, which is played by Dan Aykroyd, we got to point out that this is a sad-ish movie to see Phoenix in,
Oh
because
yeah.
dies the following year, and his star was really, really rocketing at the time.
Yeah, he was really popular, so his death was like a big deal. I remember it was like on the news for weeks.
Yeah, at the time it felt like a major, yeah, just real tragedy. I mean, it was the losing Heath Ledger of that decade.
Right.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I think he does a capable job in a fairly ho-hum role. I don't know, you were kind of down on him as being not that interesting, but I did note that he had said that he took this role actually like specifically because he just wanted to do an easy acting role, something that wasn't very demanding, because he was still like feeling kind of
Oh, okay.
like freaked out over getting so much into the psychosis of his character in the previous movie that he'd done, which was My Own Private Idaho,
Hmm.
which I think was the one that was like really, I think he got Oscar attention for that one.
Oh, so that might explain it. He just wanted a quick, easy break, after working so hard on that one.
Literally, quote, a low stress money gig was him for this movie.
Right. Aykroyd plays Mother, who's our hardware tech specialist. What he'll do is he'll wire in a bank phone list so Whistler can receive guard calls for an alarm, runs a lot of surveillance, like getting a listening device up close to the mathematician's office, running the directional mic at the toy company, major plus spy points, for the voice stress meter polygraph that he created when they call the NSA.
Yeah, it was. The scene in the movie didn't actually accomplish much. They didn't accomplish very much with that phone call. As the audience, we appreciate that scene quite a bit. But yeah, I just like using that voice stress meter, and I like that he specifies that it's not, like it's not literally a polygraph, but it should be able to tell. And just that scene where they're confirming to Bishop on the line, like, yep, he's telling the truth.
Yeah.
He's telling the truth. He's lying.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really sophisticated. I don't even want to know the math behind that. And then, some more plus spy points.
Do you think that exists? I'm sure it's got to exist.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's not as reliable as they make it in the movie, but I'm sure something makeshift like that could exist and be There's got to be some level of accuracy to it, especially. Well, it might even be more sophisticated these days because of the like milestones in linguistics and in speech stresses and stuff like that. There's experts on that type of stuff. So I'm sure, with a lot of the crossover disciplines these days, I just don't think it would be as accurate as they made the movie look.
I'll bet you at the very least, with now that voice is all carried digitally and you can store it, and run analysis on it later, I'm sure that they could do like fairly, again, like nothing that's gonna like stand up in court or anything like that, but like, fairly good guesses as to the stress level of a person, especially if you have time to like run it through computers, and if you have like a lot of baseline regular conversations from the person.
Yeah.
I'm also here to give Mother my number 2 best tradecraft, which is where this is the part where they have sonically kind of isolated where the Ben Kingsley's office is, and that's where they know that the black box will be kept. But then he's just doing like 24-hour recording of the outside of the building and just watching like which lights go off in which windows and who comes out at which times, and just keeping records. And from this, he can deduce like who the person is that works in the office that they want to target. And from there to get that guy's license plate. And from there, they're like off to the races. Now they can like, do their DMV checks and credit report checks and really set up the op.
Yeah, that was really cool. I really liked that whole scene where he's like zooming in, and it was really cool how they did that. And it was totally just him watching the videos, figuring out, okay, here's a time period. This is the guy we should probably target.
Yeah, he got my number 3 and number 2 best because these were the most, interesting spy-related stuff that I could find in the movie. I do have a number 1 floating around here somewhere. Oh, yeah, I remember what it is. But, just as far as spy stuff, I think Mother, he's on top of his shit. I did enjoy seeing Aykroyd in the film. He pretty much quit starring in stuff by this point, but he's always fun to... He's just, I don't know. He's a guy that, even though he's not a great actor, and he's got kind of a stilted delivery in a lot of stuff, but there's just something kind of enjoyable about watching him, don't you think?
Absolutely. I'm always happy to see Aykroyd.
And it's another, like, I don't know, it's just a really cool nod to use him as the, like, conspiracy theorist in this group. Because Dan Aykroyd is, and you didn't know this until I told you, but
no, yeah,
he's absolutely like probably the most high-profile celebrity that is deep into conspiracy theories, like very public profile conspiracy theories.
Definitely fits the bill for him, I guess.
Yeah, and they get some fun interaction with him and Sidney Poitier.
Yeah, and it was nice to see him. It's always great to see Aykroyd, just to add to this like huge cast.
And we got one more guy.
Yeah, let's talk about our MVP.
David Strathairn as Whistler.
So as we were talking about earlier, he's based on the real Whistler, who was a blind phone freak that had perfect pitch.
I think the guy's actual name was like Puffy Dragon or something.
Oh, really? His name wasn't Whistler?
No, he wasn't called Whistler. The reason that this character's name is Whistler, though, is to be a callback to the fact the real guy, Puffy Dragon, was famous for being able to whistle into phones and fool the telecommunication system that way.
Oh, wow.
It's just another one of those Easter eggs, which this movie is just full of.
Yeah, it's like never ending. When we first meet him, he's actually reading a Braille version of Playboy.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And I checked that out, by the way. That's legit.
Really?
Yep. I love that, and I loved finding out it was real. I also love his snazzy-ass Braille computer.
That was one of the coolest things ever, the keyboard.
Oh, man.
I wonder how real that is. Like,
totally real. Totally
oh,
real.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
got the little keys that shoot, like dynamically shoot the little pins up through holes to change the letters, and so you can read text that way. The only thing though that I did find out about it is that they're insanely expensive and they don't last long.
That sucks. I would imagine so. There's a lot of moving parts on that.
Yeah, right. And a lot of contact with the fingers is going to mess up those like tiny. That shit. The mechanics of that must be so incredibly delicate.
Yeah.
And I just noticed, by the way, I don't know where I came up with Puffy Dragon, but no, I see here now that he was Joseph Carl Engresia Jr. and his phone freak tag was Joy Bubbles. He's possibly the second most famous phone freak after Captain Crunch, in fact.
Well, that keyboard, he's actually the one that figures out how big of a deal the black box is. And when he hooks up the dynamic Braille keyboard, and he figures out that he can start routing the black box to take over the Federal Reserve, air traffic control. What was it, like the power for New England?
Yeah, all these things that make us realize just how dangerous this black box is, and I know you wanted to give him +5 points for that.
Definitely,
which is cool. He does all sorts of telecommunications stuff. I was really impressed with like how much work they gave him to do. You know, like I was saying before, like I feel like they didn't give Carl enough stuff to do. They're not shy about heaping really cool, phone freak hacking type tradecraft stuff on Whistler, which again just goes back to this whole thing of this movie being about like that time in tech.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's also our MVP because Strathern's performance, and this is the guy out of the entire cast, like I couldn't have told you what his name was if you asked me to name all the actors in this movie. I would have named everyone except him. I would have said, there was Poitier, Redford, McConnell, Aykroyd, Phoenix, and a blind guy, and Ben Kingsley was in there. But I really dig his performance in here. I'm not sure exactly, like, it might be one of those things where, like, people are always making fun of actors for, like, playing mentally handicapped people as like their thing that really shows off their cases. Like some people really like kind of make fun of that, and it might be one of those things where like playing a blind person is actually easier than it might appear to a non-actor like myself. But he really sells it.
He does.
I really like not just his like physical like mannerisms, but also just the way his fingers move and the way they like climb and search things out, and it just feels really solid.
Yeah.
I was even a little surprised. I thought like maybe I would check and see like what are like blind people's favorite most iconic movies or movie roles, and I couldn't find this one anywhere on that list. It was all I could find was movies where like a blind person was the star of the movie. But I would think that blind people would be like, just as far as representation, or especially if you were like a young blind person, and
there's that Helen Keller movie, right? Where that's really famous or whatever for what you're talking about. The actress that played her as a young Helen Keller walked around with a blindfold for like 2 weeks or something.
Sure. But yeah, I would say like if you were someone that had like a young blind person in your life or something, like this is a movie you would really be excited to show them, or not
Yeah.
show in quotes. And that will conclude our tradecraft analysis of Martin Bishop and his ragtag team. We're going to break here and catch up with you next week. In the follow-up episode, we're going to tackle the tradecraft of the villains, also the henchmen, and look at a handful of the side characters in the movie.
As always, the best way to make sure you don't miss out on that is to hit that subscribe button on iTunes, Google, your favorite podcast app. Also, you can find updates on our Facebook page or website, spieslikeus.net. And please, if you can help us out and give us some feedback by rating us and leaving comments, we're always trying to improve the show, and your thoughts would be a huge help.
The preceding transmission sampled the songs Ice Cold by Audionautics, Enter the Party by Kevin MacLeod, and sound effects from freesound.org. Attributions and links are found at spieslikeus.net. Editing by Todd Hostetler.